Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the latest in a series of webinars, actually, that we have been putting on, looking and exploring the application and adoption of AI in and around the UK and global businesses. Today is a fantastic session where we're going to be looking at securing the frontier and actually the importance of good governance to mitigate risk and make sure that all the controls and the operational requirements are actually in place. I think it's going to be a fantastic session. For those that I haven't met before, virtually or in person, my name is Jo Gilhooly and I lead our enterprise team here at Transparity. So we're delighted to be joined by three fantastic hosts / special guests today. Peter, can I hand over to you first of all to introduce yourself?
Certainly. Thank you, Jo. And good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here this morning. I'm Peter Rising. I'm a partner solution architect at Microsoft, focusing on cyber security. So really, really happy to be joining wonderful friends at Transparity this morning who are doing some great things in the security space, and to be presenting alongside the wonderful Rob and the wonderful Ian. So thank you for having me, and perhaps I'll pass over to Rob to introduce himself.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. So good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us. My name is Rob Unger. I'm a principal security architect here at Transparity. I focus on identity security, security operations, and things like management security. And I'm joined by Ian. I'll hand over to you.
Thanks, Rob. So nice to meet everyone. I'm Ian Goodyear-Green. I'm a principal architect for governance, risk and compliance. So I deal with a lot of the governance and the data security side.
Fantastic. Thank you, guys. We're still acquiring more people actually joining, which is fantastic. So if anyone can hear a bit of the Teams bing, then apologies for that. I think just to set a little bit of context before we get into the meat of the conversation, because I think we're going to have a lot of rich discussion today. What we're talking about today has actually been born of some more commissioned research that we've done. I think one of the ladies is going to drop the latest research into the Teams chat, so you've got full access to it. But ultimately, what we're talking about today is really looking at, as I said at the beginning, framing the context of what good GRC actually needs to do to actually help accelerate the AI train that is actually already indeed at the station and potentially out of the station. There's a couple of pieces that I think really probably scene set or frame the discussion that we're having today. I had a good read of this report overnight, and I think there's a couple of pieces that, that are quite staggering. I think if you look at the application of AI in businesses today, I think I wrote down a couple of the pieces here, 43, so nearly half of organizations are already driving and utilizing AI-driven analytics to actually inform business decisions. So that's actually something that's already in the operating muscle of organizations, and we're using that AI-informed and infused decision-making to figure out the trajectory of businesses. That's both a problem statement and also an opportunity, depending on your view of risk. But that probably frames, the scene set of it. There's also a couple of things in there. Over a third of people that actually surveyed as well are actually utilizing third-party AI tools. There's broad adoption, whether that's shadow AI or a number of other applications, which obviously gives security and risk teams a little bit of a headache and a heartburn. But I think that, the overwhelming sentiment of the research is this isn't on the way, it's already here, it's already infused into organizations. And actually what we're going to talk about today is making sure that organizations can continue to get the right governance, risk and compliance strategies and understand the right controls and tool sets to ensure that you can actually accelerate business in the way that we know that the way that we're looking in that frontier mindset. So I love the title of this, by the way, the Mind the Governance Gap. And I think without further ado, I'll hand over to the gents who are going to talk us through some of their interesting parts. So over to you, Ian.
Great, thanks, Jo. So I wanted to pick out a couple of highlight stats that I thought from the research really shows what we're seeing with organizations in their journey. So we're seeing that kind of shift from those that are piloting and trialing AI. And so you can see that kind of 7 in 10 are now moving towards that production of their AI tooling. And also on top of that, we're also seeing the type of AI change. So where it was previously a lot of retrieval agents, we're now seeing things that are more autonomous and kind of often away and doing their own things and being observed by other agents. But where we talk about that gap, just that last stat there, where we talk about just 28% essentially have ongoing governance with continuous oversight. So that's where that gap is really forming. So the adoption's increasing, but the governance isn't quite keeping up. So really, in my mind, it all starts with that observability piece. So one of the main gaps we're seeing is essentially people don't know what is happening with AI within their organization. So, being able to understand what AI is doing and the data that it's touching, is that foundational part of them being able to govern, protect both your environment and your data further down the road. So, I think that's quite a telling stat. So only 14% of organizations are very confident that they can see how AI is being used across their organization. And it's interesting that it's actually down from our previous research. So again, just reinforcing how that adoption's increasing, but the governance isn't quite keeping pace. So if we think about, okay, well, how do we start building that observability? You can start with Defender. So something that a lot of people have, so Defender for cloud apps. So it's part of your Defender suite or your E5 licensing. That's how we're going to start building a bit of an idea of what AI is being used in your organization. So here we can see a real production tenant with a mixture of AI use, both sanctioned and unsanctioned. And if I actually zoom in, so we take the top row, so here we see a ChatGPT, and this is not an uncommon view that we see. And we have essentially 2 gig of uploaded information into that, and it's an unsanctioned app here. So it's not necessarily one that we have control or visibility over. So it's really increasing that data exfiltration risk. And this is really in a traditional sense. So this is me going to the browser or opening the app, entering information into that prompt, which in AI terms is kind of almost legacy now, where we see people pushing towards the frontier. So because this is a great way to start, but we're talking frontier here, so there are new threats that we need to think about. So Rob, I was hoping, can you give me a couple of examples?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's move on. So observability, absolutely, is the evidentiary basis for governance, right? We can't govern what we can't see. And when we talk about what are we observing, I thought it was important to just give some examples across sort of what I would call this attack weaponized, simply a trusted framework. So we have attacks on our agents. You see these examples here: Echo Leak, Force Leak, Camo Leak. These are all examples of indirect prompt injection, adversary stealing, whether it's data or credentials outside of our organization. We also have attacks involving AI. So this examples in the middle column here, if we look at the GTG 10002, that's a nation state threat actor actually orchestrating agents to perform sort of offensive security operations against companies. Fake agents are a really great example of where the threat actors aren't actually using AI. What they're doing is they're maliciously cloning repositories, poisoning them, and then waiting for organizations' tools to come and discover and use those README files as instructions to actually deliver their malicious payloads and make off with things like credentials and auth tokens. But it's not just adversarial things, and you don't have to be a target for an adversary. A couple of examples here, and I'm not going to give the Hugging Face one too much more airtime. I think it's had enough of that recently. But another great example of this is the Pocket OS, where in actual fact, this was just an agent with excessive agency. We use the OWASP top 10 reference, where it went, found some credentials that it needed to perform its activities, and deleted a production database and backups in 9 seconds. And so when we look at those, what do we need? What does the defense actually need? And across all of them, the same thing. It's we need to establish an identity for every agent so that we know where those agents are and what they're doing, what permissions they have. We need to make sure that we've got observability across all of those surfaces, whether it's the identity, whether it's the network, whether it's across the data, or even on the endpoint. And then we also need to be building in those checkpoints, right? Because this is what frontier means. It doesn't mean go and build autonomous systems that go off and run themselves. They are human-led agentic solutions, human orchestrated agentic solutions. And it's not achievable by policy alone, right? This isn't a paper governance. This is a capability play. And it's very much a security engineering problem to solve. So Pete, it needs a control plane. Can you tell us, what does Microsoft have in the portfolio today that can help us build that control plane?
Yeah, certainly. So let me take control. Okay. And right, so from AI adoption to governed execution, I'm going to talk a little bit in a short few moments about the governance challenge, to the controls that the guys are going to show you in a couple of very cool demos that you'll see in just a moment. And in terms of that shift, it's very much fair to say that agents are not something that are coming. They are very much part of what's going on right now, part of that enterprise fabric, not a future risk. And people who are using Microsoft products are already connecting Copilots and plugins and APIs and autonomous workflows to sensitive data and business processes. And we've had human identities for a very, very long time in the Microsoft products that we're all familiar using, but we've also now got agentic identities in place as well. And those agent identities can access data and they can make external connections. So the guys have already talked a lot about observability, which is a very important word in the new frontier. No, well, pun intended, definitely. And that's really, really crucial to the story. Observability is key to knowing what agents exist in your environment, who is owning them, what they can access, and how they behave. And then you can govern those agents, apply lifecycle controls to them, entitlement management, policy and least privilege controls, which are massively important across not only those humans, but those agents as well that have their own identities, and apply protection principles to them as well across the identities, the data, and AI-specific threats across the whole kill chain. Massively, massively important. So what does this look like in our approach at Microsoft? In terms of the story we are now telling, it's that we have one control plane across 4 single solution families that I'm sure all of the attendees on this webinar this morning will and should be very, very familiar with. Agent 365 is the center of this. It becomes that control plane grounded in the identity, security, network, and data controls that you've already been running with Microsoft tooling for many, many years. We are talking about Microsoft Entra, the artist formerly known as Azure AD, and that name still crops up to this day in many of our portals, much to my chagrin, and I tell engineering about this regularly, but what can you do? But Entra is the identity access governance and internet access as well, and internet private access also, if we're being very, very specific. Defender XDR, detection, posture, and response across those attacks that we need to be very, very aware of. Copilot and M365, I mean, productivity signals and agent experiences. Copilot is everywhere. And with Microsoft Copilot now, we have multi-models built into that. We have Anthropic, we've got OpenAI, and much more. And there's that choice that is tied to making the right decision for which model is going to achieve the right purpose in your Copilot. And then I've deliberately left my favorite to last. I'm a purview guy. Anyone who knows me knows I'm a purview guy. Data security posture with things like sensitivity labels, DLP policies, lifecycle management, and much, much more. This is one of the real important stories to tell with Copilot and Agentic, because it all ties into data, and Purview is all about data protection, data governance, and everything comes together here. And the value, as it says at the bottom of this slide, is not another console, it's the correlation between all of these things. We're very much talking as we move into FY27 at Microsoft now about the platform rather than the point solutions. And that ties in perfectly to the security story that I'm very, very passionate about telling, that you need to be thinking about defense in depth across these toolings that we have available. So let's just move on and talk a little bit briefly about E7. I can't not talk about E7 because it's been general availability since May the 1st. And Agent 365 is one of the core components of E7. And the E7 story is all about capability convergence and discover what exists, then decide what should be allowed, enforce continuously, and then respond when the risk changes. And we can see this progression going through. And the demos that the guys are going to show you in a couple of moments, this is why it matters, because Transparity have the expertise and can support turning that control plane into an operating model and not just a licensed feature set, which is so crucial. So just finally, before I hand back over to Ian, what I'd really like you to listen out for as we go through the demos that I'm excited to see as well. Do listen out for these 3 practical questions to ask yourself in your organizations and in your leadership teams. Number 1, can you see every agent and connection? You might think you've not got agents right now, but you very likely have. That inventory and ownership and permissions and routes and behavior, very, very important to know all about that. Number 2, are you able to govern them with the same rigor as you can your human identities in terms of lifecycle and access reviews and policies, least privilege, accountability? And finally, can you detect and respond when intent or the risk changes? Do think about these things as you're watching along, and you'll see these questions getting answered as the guys move through what they're going to show you in just a few moments. So with that being said, that is me done for now. So I am going to hand back over to Ian. Over to you, my friend.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Peter. So we're just going to pop also alongside the demo, we're just going to pop a little poll up just to get a bit of an understanding of where you see your challenges in your organization, because we know this is a very broad reaching subject, so be interested to kind of get people's views. So as we mentioned, we can kind of talk around it, but I'm very much a kind of person that likes to see it in action if I can. So I wanted to just go through a bit about Agent 365, talk about what it is, how it works, and how you'll maybe be used to seeing it and without even knowing. So hopefully most people. Sorry?
Really quickly, is this another portal, Ian? Because I think it's really important. Just try.
No, it's not. Now, I do think everyone knows there are a couple of Microsoft portals. So luckily this time, it's not a separate place. So it should be in the places that your teams are used to working with, and it's just an extension of that.
Awesome.
So if we look at this, it should kind of feel familiar. So we've got the admin center here, and if we go to we have the agents blade here, so we can kind of see the initial fly out here in the middle. So if I go looking into that, I've got the landing page for Agent 365. So here I can see how many agents I've got, my users, how active, also where they're created and the platforms they sit on. We can also see a little bit of a flyout of kind of what tasks I might have. And we can also see the inventory. So this is the first portal call, and it may be something you've kind of come across in your own portals, but this is where we can pull in agents that are created across the kind of ecosystem.
Yeah, and I think just on that, it's important to note this isn't just agents that are built in the Microsoft ecosystem. or agents that are created by yourselves in sort of Foundry or the Copilot Studio, there is an SDK for Agent 365 as well. So if you have agents homed in other platforms, you can absolutely integrate those into that control plane.
Yeah, exactly. So you can build them your own and have the SDK, and we can also sync them in from places like Vertex, etc. So it really becomes that single pane of glass where your users, where your admins are used to working with the tooling. So if I look at my Zava Fabric supplier agent, here we can see that it's an agent that's already live in my environment. So I can see it's already deployed to some users. It's built in Foundry. I can see where it's actually been published. And I can start building a bit of a picture of it. So say I haven't seen this agent before as the admin. I can go, oh, my first port of call would be, what's the security and compliance on that agent? So here I can see, actually, I can see it's monitored by Purview. I can see that we're essentially detecting what's happening. So that puts me at ease a little bit. I can see that it's now got an intro identity. So that gives me all the features that I would have with a user. So I'll come on to a few of those a little bit later. And I can also see that will make Rob very happy is essentially we have Defender covering it. So Rob, is there anything that we need to think about with kind of setting this up?
So there are a couple of things. That's a great question, Ian. So if it's not just going to link to Defender out the box, you're going to need to go and do a little bit. It's very minimal configuration, but you're just going to want to configure Defender to start ingesting that telemetry data from Agent 365. You're also going to want to go into Copilot Studio and make sure that you're enabling those real-time protections that we get with Defender, so that we, we're bringing that protect, as Pete said, layer into our agents.
Right. Yeah. So again, that's what Agent 365 is giving us. It's giving us that kind of extension of where we've traditionally had these tools and extending it to agents. So we know the security and compliance is good. So, okay, well, what's this agent potentially doing? So I can have a little bit of a look at it in terms of what permissions has it got. So I get a readout of the permissions and including, most importantly, how privileged we consider those to be. And activity. So it's all very well having this information on them, but what are these agents doing? Are we seeing lots of exceptions? So we can really find out how well that agent's working. So that's the inventory. So what about, okay, well, what happens if an agent starts going wrong? So here we have risky agents. So we can see that filters my list, and I can have this comms agent here, which I have 2 alerts on. And if I have a look at what these alerts are, I actually have abnormal sign-in frequency and a risky user. So you can see the source is Entra, which, as we've kind of talked about, we're not reinventing the wheel here. We're using the tooling that we know and using the same correlation signals that we would for a user, just extending them to an agent, looking for that sign-in frequency. And we obviously can build out that path with a risky user. So I've looked at this. I'm not particularly keen on letting this kind of continue to be used, so I can simply lock it. So again, it's just giving me that nice quick control and that control plane across how an agent's working. Now, I don't remember if anyone remembers when Teams first came around and everyone was able to create their own team. So team sprawl was a thing, and obviously the new modern version is essentially agent sprawl. So what we want to make sure is where we're creating agents, that they all have a owner or a sponsor assigned to them. So if we do have someone who's built agents and then maybe left the organization, what we want to do is make sure those agents are reassigned to someone who essentially is able to vouch for that agent and own it. So if I look at my invoice processing agent, we can see here that it's a Copilot Studio Lite. So it's a kind of user-built experience. We don't have an owner for it. However, it is already published to some users. So I want to make sure someone's kind of able to be accountable. So I can simply add a new owner and assign it like this. So easy, that exactly how you kind of manage like a group or anything that you're used to kind of in the Entra portal. We can just do that with agents now. If you're more of a visual person, I always find this is very handy as well. So if I want to understand the correlation of agents in my organization, we have the map. So hopefully this is just about big enough for everyone to see, but here I've got my Azure Foundry, and I can see that comms agent we were just talking about, and I can see the correlation between other agents it interacts with. So if I click on that, obviously I can see that, well, actually, if someone comes to me about one of these child agents saying that maybe there's an interaction there that's not working quite so well, but that's possibly because I blocked it. And we can also see that chain that that agent would essentially communicate with. So I'm not all about controls and blocking. Sometimes we're about enabling. And hopefully most people within this call understand if we get our bits right, we actually are an enabler. So if I think about the requests, so here I've got Mona's essentially built an agent that she wants to publish into the organization. So this becomes a bit of a check gate for us. So if we think about an agent intake process or a life cycle, we want to make sure that agents coming in are essentially are able to be built and deployed, but we just have those checks and balances through it. So here as an admin, I can essentially look at the data and tools that this agent connects to. So here I can see it's OneDrive, SharePoint, people, and you can see it goes to public sites. So that means, okay, well, maybe I need to just make sure I understand that protection is wrapped around it because it's essentially going to call externally. I can also look at graph connectors. So what is it able to connect to and the tools that it uses. So I know there was a chat in the a question in chat about MCP usage. So, here I'm looking at, well, these are the MCP servers this agent would actually be using. So it ties into some of that. I can also see the knowledge sources that this would use. And then much like before, I can have a look at the security and compliance. I know that we're essentially got ticks all the way down here, so I'm happy with that. I can see what those permissions are, so I can go, okay, well, I'm happy with those permissions. Let's approve it. And just because I approve it, it may not need to go to everyone. So I'm going to select just Mona so she can essentially test it, check that's working. And then what we can do is apply a policy template. So if I say this one here, so you'll notice that this has essentially got an access package assigned to it. So again, where we're thinking of agents kind of being treated as if they were human identities, we can create an access package.
Ian, sorry, just to interrupt. Yeah, your screen's frozen for me, and I think a few people are having the same problem. Would you just mind resharing? Is that okay?
Of course. There's nothing like a demo going wrong when you're going through it. Who'd have thought it? Just bear with me. Right. So you should be able to see a policy templates. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. So here I can essentially get the identity protection. I've got network visibility, my lifecycle, my access package, so much like I would for a user. And then also we have full auditing available for it. Importantly, I'm going to have to accept the permissions for that as well. So here we can see essentially, again, from an audit point of view, we understand those permissions are essentially accepted, and we've essentially had a review of those. So that's it. So now essentially that agent has been approved and now appears in my store and is available for those users. So it's the same governance, the same workflow, the same control that you'll be used to using kind of from an entry point of view. But here we're looking at it from extending to an agent point of view as well. So hopefully that gives a bit of an overview. So I know, Simon, you're saying that it's too far forward. So if we get through to the end, I'll jump back in and just go through that again if I need to. So here we've talked about kind of the Agent 365 as a control plane. So what we'd also like to look at doing is, okay, well, that's an administrative point of view. What happens about from a purview kind of data classification? So that exfiltration I was talking about a bit earlier, how do we essentially protect ourselves against that? So what we can do is use those signals that we were just talking about from Purview, from Entra, and then look at the tools that Peter was talking about in kind of GSA. How do we knit those together to give us a nice kind of secure environment? So,
yeah, and I was going to say, just to set the frame for this as well. So everybody saw on the previous slides where Ian pulled up ChatGPT was the top cloud app for exfiltration of data to Gen AI. This is using Purview together with this internet access capability and Entra, and it goes to what Naveen was just asking about, that observability. This is where we can actually start to do some deeper inspection. So yeah, sorry, Ian, take it away.
No. So if I just set the scene kind of here, so we can see that I'm in ChatGPT. I'm not in the browser, I'm in the app. And essentially I have a free account here. So, if I think about the exfiltration risks, I'm putting company IP in, there's a risk of IP training and going into the model, things like that. So I'm going to ask my question, and then I'm going to do what I'd obviously never normally do, and look to upload a document into my app. And you can see what we've got essentially is a network failure there because we're inspecting it at the network level. So that means I've got something that's potentially maybe labeled as highly confidential. We've got a rule saying that can't go out to ChatGPT, and we kind of get this at the network level. So let's say I'm pretty persistent, and I'm very keen to get this ChatGPT's view on this file. So here, what I'm looking at is actually, I'm going to put some of the content. So I'm not even looking at a label here. I'm looking more at the content I'm putting in. So in this case, I'm going to ask it, and still, because we're again inspecting kind of at the content level and that network level, we still get that ring fence protection. So it's a really good way of essentially making sure that we're looking end to end and holistically across the platform. So that's how it looks to an end user. So I'm assuming that most people are here because we'd like to know what it looks like a little bit on the back end. So this is the Purview portal. So for those that are fairly familiar with it, hopefully it should look familiar. So if I look at DSPM, and here we can see obviously the in-guided policies where I'm looking at data exfiltration to risky destinations. So there are lots of kind of pre-populated suggestive starting policies from Microsoft. So it will give you that leg up and give you a bit of an understanding, and hopefully you can work your way through those. And this one, what I'm looking for is essentially protective of event loss. I'll get that out eventually, about sensitive data to unmanaged cloud apps. So if I look at what this policy is going to do, I have a description here, what it's going to detect, where it's going to detect. So I'm going to say, I want to look at that. And to create that policy, it's the same workflow that you've been using for DLP in other areas. So here we're looking at, okay, I want to create a DLP policy. And historically, you may have selected kind of the enterprise application devices. This time, we're going to look for inline web traffic. Same workflow as before. So I'm going to create a data loss prevention policy, probably with a slightly better naming convention, but forgive me. And then we'll look at essentially, okay, well, what are the cloud apps I want to look at this? So if I look at the adaptive scope, because I want it where possible to be adaptive, so I don't have to manage it, here I want to look at all managed AI apps, all unmanaged AI apps. And so
this, yeah, I was going to say, so this is the Defender for Cloud Apps catalog. So if you're familiar with Defender for Cloud Apps, again, it's a capability that's in your E5 license today. The Cloud App catalog has applications that are categorized as Gen AI. and that is what's feeding into this purview capability here.
Yeah, so that's it, and it's great because that's that joined up holistic thing, once again, where we're kind of working with things that you'll already be used to seeing and working with. So I'm going to select unmanaged, and then obviously you can see here I'm going to go for a network and non-Microsoft secure browsers. So this is where I'm looking at, okay, well, actually I want to use GSA and Global Secure Access as my mechanism for targeting this. So I just need to create my rule now. So I'm going to create this. So in my obviously example before, what I'm looking for, I have a sensitive info type because I'm looking at the content level. So here's one I made earlier. And for this, I'm going to have a medium confidence for how I think that detection will work. Obviously, we need some actions. So here I'm looking at, okay, well, I want text that's shared with a cloud or AI app. I want to block. A file uploaded, again, block. And what I obviously want to do is notify the users when that's happening. And then that's it. I'm pretty confident in this policy, so I'm just going to turn it straight on. And then, so it's that same policy that you'll be used to for kind of in a purview world in data loss prevention, but obviously we'll be looking at how that works now. So, Rob, I think you're probably better placed to talk around this bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks, Ian. So we need not just the configuration in Purview, we also need to then integrate that with the Enter Internet Access capability. So Ian, you need the clicking for me if you get a global secure access. We're going to go to secure because that's where we configure our internet access sort of SWG policies. First thing we're going to do is we're going to create a content policy. Okay, so if you can create a new policy for me, give it another really super descriptive name. Awesome.
Yep.
And we're going to go through. So we're going to add some rules. And basically what we're going to do is going to say, hey, we're going to want to look for content. The action is going to be, we're going to hand off to Purview to do the scanning from that data loss prevention because we're doing it based on those classifiers that Ian's already selected. So we're just going to select all of our content, any file type. We want to be protecting all of our data. And then if we just add the web category in, and again, we're going to be using our Secure Web Gateway categories. These are exactly the same web categories. It's important to point this out as Azure Firewall, so it's nice and consistent stuff that you already know. It's across the board. Okay, so we're just going to add that. We're going to see just a typical SWG rule, and so we're going to go there. The content policy in itself is not enough. We actually have to create a security profile to go with it. You will have baseline policies, but we can also create a specific policy for this thing, another descriptive name. We're going to link our content policy in. So we're going to take the one that we've configured. We're going to add that in. Now, the important thing is here, we also need to be able to inspect encrypted content, right? So we should already have a TLS inspection policy. That's where we're going to be doing that trusted man in the middle. And we're going to do that as well. So we're going to add those in. And then we've got in a security policy. It doesn't stop there.
So I was going to say, so obviously that's great. And then how do we ensure people are actually essentially using that, right?
Right. And again, it comes back to we're already leveraging the capability that you're used to, or rather Microsoft is because we're not doing it, but it's delivered via conditional access. So we're going to go and we're going to deploy a conditional access policy that's going to enforce this security profile when our users authenticate. So we're going to target all our users. Now this is the important bit. We're going to be targeting internet resources with GSA rather than a traditional resources or cloud apps. So we're going to take that, and then we're going to ignore the grant controls because this isn't a block or allow with MFA or what have you. This is if you're coming in here, you match this, let's apply a security profile over the top. Yep, you leave it report only. Obviously, we're going to want to enforce this at some point. But there you go. And that end-to-end with Purview and then with Entra Internet Access is how we deliver that sort of continuous governance, preventing the exfiltration of data.
Right. So how do we, so if we think about that's us configuring it, how would you operationalize that or some of the protections in the back end?
Yeah, okay. So we've obviously covered the governance and the observability, but what about the security operations side of it? I'm going to steal the screen if that's okay, because I'm going to run through just a little demo from my end. So bear with me 1 second. Just check to make sure. Can you see that?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. And then let's just move this over. Okay, so this is Cecil. Cecil's an IT admin at Zava, and he's used to this Agent 365 portal, right? Or he's using this Agent 365 portal. You've seen this in the demo that Ian previously went through. Cecil's going to go in and he's going to click on this Manage Agent Risk, and we can see the same sort of risk signals before. We're pulling them out using that Enter ID protection. We're going to drill into the one that sort of has a couple of alerts with it. I'm going to switch to a laser pointer because that's much nicer. And also quite a high volume of active users. So we're going to dig into that one, and we're going to see that, hey, there are 2 alerts with this agent that were detected. And what we're going to do is we're going to pivot out into Defender. So in actual fact, IT, they're going to hand it off to our security operations team. So we're going to go hand over to Isaac, who's our SecOps analyst, and he's going to take it from here. So, excuse me, anybody that's used Defender XDR or the Microsoft Security Portal, depending on what you want to call it, will be familiar with this experience, or should be. We have a asset inventory on the side here that now includes AI agents, and that's that integration that Ian was asking about earlier. And we can also see the incidents relating to those. So again, we're going to drill into that incident, and we're going to open the incident page here. So immediately, we're going to see a familiar incident view. If anybody has used this, we've got our incident graph here, we've got our attack story down the side, and we've also got some detail for each of those. Now, Isaac's a pretty experienced SecOps analyst. He's going to look at this and he's going to say, okay, our user Griffin Door, based on the signals, we absolutely think he's compromised. So we're going to go in here and we're going to take the response action to confirm the user is compromised. Now, that's the same response action that you take with an identity. What that's going to do is it's going to leverage things like our identity protection. It's going to raise the user to a high risk level. We're going to have risk-based conditional access that's then going to work with the identity to remediate that. But from a security operations perspective, we also want to understand a little bit more around the agent that was in scope of this. So what we're going to do is we're going to choose the agent from the incident graph. We're going to select the agent details. We can see some of the information down here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go hunt on it. And we're going to leverage all of that telemetry data that is flowing from Agent 365 in a way that our SecOps analysts are used to by, pulling out KQL from a table. Just a thing to note on this, the table's recently changed names, so it's not AI agents info anymore, it's agents info. The AI bit's been dropped, but we can run the query and then we can see all the detail that is associated with this agent. And this is just pulling that rich telemetry data from Agent 365. So we can see here what are the tools, what invokes it, what actions can it take. Now, that's great. Earlier on, I spoke about things like MCP tools and poisoning and what have you. Can we look for those, and can we look for agents that maybe are operating with make credentials and with tools? And I posted something in there, but we also have some community queries. And I'm just going to, just to finish this off, I'm going to select this query here. This is a community query, but it's going to go and say, hey, what agents are operating with maker credentials rather than the user credentials, so i.e. the people that authored it, and what are they using inside the environment? Okay. So I'm going to stop sharing there, and I'm going to go back to the deck. Bear with me just 1 second. Find the right slide. Okay. So we've obviously gone through sort of 3 back-to-back demos where we've shown you the Agent 365 control plane. We've shown you how your investment into Purview and around your data classification and what have you is now being carried through into that E7 tool set. And we touched on things like the internet access and using things like identity protection and Defender. And I think it's important to note at this point, like, these tools are absolutely great, but we need the right foundations to layer them on top of. We recently ran a Frontier forum where we had a lot of people in the room, and we went through this at a very high level. I still believe this is true. You step through this, right? You go good, you go better, you go Frontier or best. And what does it look like? It's that zero trust informed access, and not just a point in time. Go back and assure that you're actually doing it. Make sure that every identity is being checked against those zero trust principles, like verify explicitly. Robust governed identities, good identity governance. Think about least privilege and really drill down into it, and then layer on things like the network protection for the users and the agents, and being able to classify your data, put your controls in place, and what have you, so that we're getting the right outcomes. I think we've touched on a lot of security for AI, but it would be remiss not to talk about AI for security. So just in the sort of last few minutes of the webinar, before we sort of go to questions, I don't know if people are aware, Microsoft recently announced something called Project Perception, literally the last couple of days. I could talk about it, but I've got Pete here. So Pete, would you mind just giving the people on the call a little bit of an overview as to what Project Perception is, and Microsoft's vision for that AI for security? Please.
Yeah, certainly. Very, very happy to. So I don't have slides for this, but I can point in the chat to a video that I shared on my own YouTube channel, which is available for all to see. But in brief, Project Perception is our new coordinated multi-agent defense system, agentic security built for the realities of AI. It unites signals, context, models, and specialized agents into a continuously learning system that it reasons and it prioritizes and it acts at machine speed with humans firmly in control. And 3 teams of agents will work across the security lifecycle in Project Perception. So we've got a red team, which finds the paths an attacker could take before they do so. We've got blue team agents, which work out which risks actually matter, and green team agents, which make the fixes and remediate. And this is powered by MAI Cyber One Flash, which is a purpose-built security model with OpenAI's GPT 5.4 reserved for the hardest tasks. It's tied into I'm sure you'll all have heard about MDASH. So how does MDASH come into the Project Perception equation? It's the same DNA, multi-model agentic harness, which was first seen in MDASH, is now extended with context and the red, blue, and green agents. The same underlying model that MAI Cyber One Flash, and in practice, Project Perception's red team agents take MDASH code scanning findings as an input to prioritize and guide where they test. So think of MDASH equals the building block, and Project Perception equals the coordinated defense system, which is on top. Now, the announcement of Project Perception was only a couple of days ago, but a question I've already been asked a couple of times is, well, what's the difference between Project Perception and Security Copilot? Well, it's quite simple. Security Copilot equals an AI assistant that augments the analysts. The analyst will ask, and it helps investigate and summarize and respond, but the human drives. Whereas Project Perception is an agentic system where specialized agents, as we've mentioned, continuously and proactively discover and evaluate and remediate at machine speed. Humans in control of critical decisions.
Yep.
And the shift is that from AI that assists a person, agents do the work, and both sit on the Microsoft security platform. So there you go. I hope that explains it very briefly for you.
That's perfect, Pete. Thanks very much. Okay, so that brings us to the end of the webinar. I don't know if there are any questions. Please feel free to come off mute. I know we've had a couple in the chat. Hopefully I've answered those as robustly as I can. Did anyone have any questions? No?
It's always daunting on a webinar, right?
Yeah, nobody wants to ask it. It's absolutely fine. Hopefully I've answered the questions to the best of my ability in the chat. Like just off the back of this though, then next steps, there's a couple of things. Firstly, please go and download the research, have a read of that, see how well it resonates with yourselves. And then please do reach out to us. If you're a Transparity customer today, you'll already have a route in. If not, please use the contact information that's on our website, or reach out to me or Ian or Joe directly. We are offering some readiness assessments, both around Agent 365, so that's a session with Ian, or around Entra Global Secure Access, which is a short assessment with myself. Yeah, that I think is everything I have to say. Joe, is there anything you want to close out with?
No, a really rich discussion. I had a full circle moment when we started looking into how we were going to be managing agents, and took myself back to my childhood days in Back to the Future or whichever other kind of film I might have been watching. But a really rich discussion. It's fantastic to see the types of tool sets and control planes that are already in, not in production, but actually in use, so that actually this becomes, a quicker adoption. I think, Ian, you coined the phrase in the right way, right, which is actually driving business enablement and acceleration, not just the kind of the blocking and tackling, which we know the teams have to do in parallel, but making sure that kind of the right risk frameworks are in place so that people can securely adopt AI. So fantastic just to understand a little bit more about the technical application of that. So thanks for joining us, folks. Thanks for sticking with us. Stay cool, and we shall speak to you all again soon. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
Cheers all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.